I never thought those words would actually come out of my mouth, but there they were hanging in the air between us like a grenade with a pin pulled because I had no better option. The look on Trevor's face when I said it. I'll probably remember that till the day I die. Not that I feel bad about it or anything. I mean, he's the one who cornered me with that question. In the first place. What was I supposed to do? Lie. I'm Bianca, 33, and I guess this is the story of how my marriage imploded, and now I'm staring at an eviction notice I can't afford to fix. It all started 3 weeks ago when Trevor and I were having dinner. Nothing special, just take out from that Thai place down the street that he likes more than I do. He'd been quiet lately, but I figured he was just being moody like usual. Then out of nowhere, he puts down his fork, looks me dead in the eyes and asks, "Bianca, why did you marry me?" Just like that. All serious, like he'd been practicing it. I almost laughed. Honestly, 6 years of marriage and now he wants to know why. I could have given him the easy answer, the one most wives would give, because I loved you. Duh. But something in me just snapped. Maybe it was the way he asked, like he already knew the answer and was just testing me. Or maybe I was just tired of pretending. Because I had no better option at the time, I said, then took another bite of pad thai, like I just commented on the weather. You were stable. You had a decent job and you were obsessed with me. It seemed practical. The color drained from his face so fast I thought he might pass out. Practical? He repeated like he was trying out a foreign word. So you never loved me? I rolled my eyes. See, this is exactly what I mean about him being dramatic. Does it matter now? We've been married 6 years. What did you think was going to happen? When you asked me that question that I'd gush about how you're my soulmate. Grow up, Trevor. Looking back, maybe I could have softened it a bit. But honestly, his constant need for validation was exhausting. Always checking in, always wanting to know how I felt, if I was happy, if I loved him. It's like, dude, I married you. Isn't that enough? Do we have to keep talking about feelings every 5 minutes? I didn't tell him that when he proposed, I actually waited 3 days before saying yes, because I was hoping my ex would call, or that I'd spent the first 2 years of our marriage wondering if I'd made a mistake, or that sometimes when he touched me, I had to force myself not to pull away. Some truths you just keep to yourself, you know, but that night with that one direct question, it's like he was asking for the knife. The worst part wasn't even what I said, it was how he reacted. No yelling, no storming out. He just sat there, nodding slowly like I'd finally confirmed something he'd suspected all along. Then he quietly got up, put his plate in the sink, and went to the spare bedroom. No drama. And somehow that felt worse than if he'd thrown the plate against the wall. The next morning he was gone before I woke up. Left for work early, I figured. I sent him my usual text asking him to pick up milk on the way home. Acting normal, you know. He didn't answer. Which was weird because Trevor always answers. Always. By that evening, when he still wasn't home, I was actually starting to worry. Not like concerned for his safety worry. More like who's going to take out the trash tomorrow. Worry. He finally came home around 10:10, smelling like he'd been at a bar. Trevor hardly ever drinks, so I knew something was up. I was sitting on the couch scrolling through Instagram when he walked in, and I made sure to keep scrolling like I hadn't been checking the time every 5 minutes. Where have you been? I asked, not looking up from my phone. I texted you about the milk. I needed some time to think, he said, standing there in the entryway like he was a guest in our apartment. About what you said last night. I sighed and put my phone down. Are we seriously still talking about this? I was just being honest. Would you rather I lied? No, he said quietly. I'm glad you were honest. It explains a lot. Something about the way he said it made my stomach drop, like he was already somewhere else. For the first time, I wondered if maybe I'd gone too far. Not that I'd admit that to him. Whatever, I said, picking my phone back up. Just don't forget the trash needs to go out tomorrow. I could feel him staring at me, but I kept scrolling, double-tapping a photo of my friend Melissa's vacation in Cabo. She was there with her husband, all smiles and sunset cocktails. I found myself wondering if she really loved him or if she'd settled too. Trevor didn't say anything else. He just went to the bathroom, took a shower, and then went back to the spare bedroom. That was the first night in our marriage he didn't kiss me goodnight, even when we were fighting. And despite everything I'd said, I lay awake for hours, listening to the unfamiliar silence from the other side of the wall. I didn't know it then, but that silence was just the beginning. If I'd known what was coming, how my life was about to fall apart piece by piece, maybe I would have gotten up, gone to that spare bedroom, and told him I was sorry, that I didn't mean it, that of course I loved him. But I didn't. I just lay there telling myself he'd get over it by morning. He didn't. The next morning, I woke up to emptiness. No coffee brewing, no shower running, just Silence. I rolled over and checked my phone. No text from Trevor saying he'd gone to work early. That's when I noticed his car keys were still on the hook by the door, but his gym bag was gone. Weird. I went about my day like normal, figuring he needed space. That night, when he came home late again, something had changed. He wasn't angry. He was different, calmer, like he'd figured something out that I wasn't privy to. I opened a separate checking account today, he said while microwaving leftovers. Just announced it like he was telling me about the weather. Why would you do that? I asked, feeling a strange flutter of panic. He shrugged. Just seems practical. The way he said practical, throwing my own words back at me, made my chest tighten. But instead of apologizing or backtracking, I doubled down. Whatever. Just make sure the mortgage gets paid from somewhere. Over the next 2 weeks, Trevor transformed into someone I barely recognized. He stopped asking how my day was, stopped checking if I needed anything from the store, stopped looking hurt when I forgot about his work presentation, the one he'd been preparing for months, the one I'd promised to help him practice. 4. When we were with friends, I'd catch him watching me with this detached curiosity, especially when I'd exclude him from inside jokes with my girlfriends or point out that hot guy for marketing who just walked into the bar. Isn't he your type, Trev? I'd say loud enough for everyone to hear. Then add, oh wait, you don't have a type, do you? Our friends would laugh uncomfortably while Trevor would just smile slightly and take another sip of his beer. But instead of fighting back or getting upset like he used to, he'd simply nod and say, you're right, Bianca. Then change the subject. It was infuriating. I started noticing other changes too. Money missing from our joint account. Not stolen. Withdrawn with transaction records. When I confronted him, he just said he was investing in himself. What does that even mean? His phone, which used to be an open book to me, now had a passcode. When I asked why, he said calmly, privacy is important in a healthy relationship, don't you think? Rich, coming from the guy who used to text me his location, without me even asking. The more he pulled away, the more I found myself trying to get a reaction. Any reaction. I'd forget to tell him about dinner plans with my family, then act surprised when he'd be upset about sitting at home alone. I told you last week. I'd insist. You never listen when I talk. He'd just stare at me with those eyes that suddenly seemed to see too much, then say, if you say so, Bianca, in that new, maddeningly calm voice. Then came the weekend I realized things were truly falling apart. I came home from brunch with my friends, where I'd spent an hour complaining about Trevor's many shortcomings to find him methodically packing a suitcase. What are you doing? I asked, my voice higher than I intended. Taking a break. He replied without looking up. My brother said I could stay with him for a while. That's when panic really set in. Not because I couldn't bear to lose him, though. The thought of facing our friends and family and admitting my marriage had failed was humiliating, but because I suddenly realized how much I depended on Trevor for everything. Our apartment that I definitely couldn't afford on my own, the car payments, the health insurance. Through his job, even the stupid little things like killing spiders and remembering which day was trash day. You can't just leave, I said, trying to sound firm, but hearing the desperation in my voice. We're married. You took vows. Trevor finally looked up at me, and the clarity in his eyes was terrifying. So did you, Bianca, for better or worse. Remember, not until someone better comes along. That's not fair, I sputtered. I've been committed to this marriage. Have you? He asked quietly, zipping his suitcase. Because from where I'm standing, you've spent 6 years making it clear that I was your backup plan, the safety net you settled for. That's not what I meant. I backpedaled. I was just being honest that night. Everyone settles in some way. No, Bianca, not everyone settles. Some people actually love their partners. The simplicity of his statement hit me like a slap. I switched tactics. Look, I'm sorry if I hurt your feelings. Okay, but you can't throw away 6 years. Because of one comment I made when I was tired and irritated. It wasn't one comment, he said, picking up his suitcase. It was just the first time you were honest about how you really feel. As he walked toward the door, something inside me snapped. I couldn't let him leave. Not like this. Not when I wasn't prepared. I grabbed his arm. Trevor, please. I didn't mean it. I do love you. I was just, I don't know, trying to hurt you because I was angry about something else. He looked down at my hand on his arm, then back at my face, searching for something. Sincerity. Probably. I tried to make my eyes well up with tears, a trick that had always worked. Before when I needed to end an argument quickly. You know what's sad? He said softly. I can't even tell when you're being genuine anymore. Then he gently removed my hand and walked out the door. I spent that night alternating between crying and furiously texting him to Demands to come home and talk about this like adults. He responded only once. I need space to think. I'll contact you when I'm ready. By Monday morning, when I calmed down enough to think strategically, I realized I needed to get him back. At least until I figured out a backup plan. I checked our bank accounts and felt sick. He'd withdrawn exactly half of our savings. Not all of it. Not more than his share. Exactly half. Like he'd been calculating this for weeks. 2 silent weeks passed. Trevor wouldn't answer my calls, responding only to texts about practical matters. Bills are paid. Through the end of the month. He wrote when I asked about finances. No, I miss you. No, can we talk? Just cold facts. Meanwhile, I was falling apart. I'd catch myself opening the fridge and staring blankly, forgetting what I needed. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, reaching for his side of the bed. Not because I missed him, I told myself, but because I was used to him being there. My friends started asking questions. Where's Trevor? They'd text before Ghetto gathers. I fed them a story about him working late, traveling for business, anything to avoid admitting the truth. I maintained different stories for different people. To my parents, Trevor was swamped with work. To my close friends, we were going through a rough patch. To my co-workers, everything was great. It was exhausting keeping the facade up, especially when Jenny from work spotted Trevor having lunch with some woman. They look pretty friendly, she reported, watching my face carefully. I laughed it off, saying he was probably networking while inside I was seething. How dare he move on already when I was stuck in limbo? By the 3rd week, desperation set in. I sent him a carefully crafted text. We need to talk about our future. I've been doing a lot of thinking. Surprisingly, he agreed to meet at a coffee shop. Neutral territory. I spent hours getting ready, choosing an outfit that reminded him of our early dating days, practicing what I'd say. I'd be vulnerable but dignified, understanding but firm. I'd remind him of our history, our commitment, our vows. When I saw him walk in, something lurched in my chest. He looked good, better than he had in months. He'd gotten a haircut, was wearing new clothes I didn't recognize. He seemed lighter somehow. Without me. Thanks for meeting, I said when he sat down, trying to sound casual while my heart raced. I've missed you. What did you want to discuss? He asked, not unkindly, but without returning the sentiment. I took a deep breath and launched into my prepared speech. How marriages have ups and downs. How perhaps we both needed to communicate better. How, despite everything, I'd stayed committed to our marriage, because I took my vow seriously. I can't help feeling like you've given up on us, I said, allowing my voice to tremble slightly. While I've been here, still wearing my ring, still honoring our commitment regardless of my feelings. Because that's what marriage is, Trevor. It's staying even when it's hard. I reached for his hand across the table, relieved when he didn't pull away. I know I said some hurtful things and I'm sorry, I was just lashing out. You know I care about you. I studied his face for signs. My words were landing. For a moment I thought I had him. Then he spoke. Bianca, he said quietly, do you remember last year's anniversary dinner? The question threw me. Of course. I lied, having no idea which dinner he meant. You don't, he stated, because you forgot our anniversary. I made reservations at that Italian place you liked, and you made plans with Melissa instead. When I reminded you, you said anniversaries were commercialized nonsense and accused me of being needy. I started to object, but he continued. The thing is, Bianca, that wasn't an isolated incident. It was a pattern. One I kept excusing because I thought if I just loved you enough, if I was patient enough, you'd eventually love me back the same way. I felt my face heating up. That's not fair. I've shown love. In my own way. Not everyone's all touchy-fey and verbal about it. It's not about being touchy-fey, he said, making air quotes with a tired sigh. It's about basic respect. Do you know what was on my phone when you asked why I married you? I shook my head, confused by the change in topic. He pulled out his phone, tapped a few times, and slid it across the table. It was a recording app, and my blood ran cold as I realized what I was looking at. You've been recording me? I hissed, pushing the phone back at him. That's illegal. It's not illegal. In this state to record conversations you're part of, he said calmly. And I started doing it for my own sanity because you'd say things and then later claim you never said them. I thought maybe I was losing my mind. So what? You've been building a case against me. My voice rose, drawing glances from nearby tables. That's sick, Trevor. No, Bianca. What's sick is telling your husband you only married him because you had no better options than trying to manipulate him into staying when you realized your meal ticket might walk out. The clinical way he said it made me flinch. That's not, let me finish, he interrupted, his calm facade finally cracking. I have recordings of you telling Melissa I was pathetic for buying you flowers. I have texts where you made plans with Mike. Yes, I know about Mike while telling me you were working late. I have evidence of you taking money from my wallet without asking, then gaslighting me when I noticed it missing. Each word felt like a physical blow. Not because he was wrong, but because he knew. All this time, I thought I was the clever one managing him, managing the narrative. But he'd been watching, documenting, preparing. So what now? I asked, my voice small. You're divorcing me. I haven't decided, he said, standing up. But I do know I deserve better than being someone's backup plan. As he walked away, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Genuine fear, not just of being alone or financially strapped, but of having miscalculated so badly. I'd spent our marriage believing I had all the power, that Trevor was the needy one who'd put up with anything to keep me. I never considered he might have a breaking point. I spent the next few days trying to regain control. I called his brother, who coldly informed me Trevor wasn't staying there anymore. I reached out to our mutual friends, who suddenly seemed busy whenever I suggested getting together. Even my own sister, when I tried to paint Trevor as the villain, looked skeptical. Honestly, Bianca, she said during our weekly lunch, I'm surprised he stayed this long. Remember my wedding? He spent the whole reception complaining that he danced like a dork to anyone who would listen. Right where he could hear you. That was just a joke, I protested. No, she said quietly. It was cruel and it was embarrassing for him and for you. A month after, Trevor walked out, when I'd convinced myself he was just taking an extended cooling-off period. The papers arrived. Divorce papers carefully prepared along with a USB drive. The note attached simply read, evidence supporting the divorce petition. I suggest reviewing before contesting anything, Trevor. With shaking hands, I plugged in the drive. It contained dozens of audio files, screenshots of texts, financial records, and a single video. I clicked on it. It was from Melissa's New Year's party last winter. I was tipsy, holding cord in her kitchen with a few of our friends. I hadn't realized Trevor was within earshot when someone asked if we were planning to have kids. God no. I heard myself say with a laugh. Can you imagine being tied to Trevor forever? I'm still keeping my options open. The camera, someone's phone probably, captured Trevor's face in the background as he heard my words. The absolute devastation that washed over him before he carefully composed himself and walked away made my stomach turn. I couldn't even remember saying it, but there it was. Irrefutable proof of my cruelty. I spent the next hour going through file after damning file. Me complaining about him to friends. Me forgetting important commitments. Me making fun of his insecurities at parties. Me lying about where I was and who I was with. When I finally stopped, I sat in stunned silence, confronted with a portrait of myself I barely recognized. Had I really been this person? This callous? This manipulative? This mean? The evidence was overwhelming. The divorce petition itself was fair, almost generous. He wasn't trying to take everything, just disentangle our lives cleanly. He'd even paid the rent through the next month to give me time to figure out my next steps. But the reality was crushing. I couldn't afford our apartment on my salary alone. My credit score was terrible because I'd always relied on Trevor's good credit for major purchases. Most of my friends were actually our friends, and judging by their recent silence, they'd chosen sides on him. I tried calling Trevor one last time. We should discuss this in person, I said, when he finally answered. I think there are things we can work through. There's nothing to discuss, he replied, his voice devoid of the anger or hurt I'd expected. Something twisted in my chest. Not jealousy exactly, but the sudden stark realization that he had moved on completely while I was still stuck. That night, scrolling through dating apps in my tiny apartment, I matched with a guy named Chris. Good job, nice smile, seems stable. During our first date, he mentioned his recent promotion in new condo. I heard myself asking all the right questions, laughing at his jokes, building up his ego. I caught my reflection in the restaurant window and saw the calculation in my eyes. So Chris said, pouring me another glass of wine, tell me about your last relationship. Why did it end? I considered my answer carefully. The truth that I treated someone who loved me like a convenience, like a backup plan, until he finally saw through me. That I'd been selfish and cruel and was now paying the price. It just didn't work out, I said, with a practiced sad smile.